Hi everyone, I am Kyla Thompson. You may know me as Bella Brave's mom. I am a medical mom and I once was a teacher, but now I'm diving full into content creation alongside my number one job right now is being a medical mom and a mom to my children. I'm gonna take you all in for a whirlwind of dates here from Bella's birth to current day. So hang on for the first little bit here and then I will catch you all up. Bella was born in Canada in December 6th, 2013. I had an awesome pregnancy with her and I had no idea she was going to be born with three very rare conditions, even more rare, all three of them together. She was unknowingly born with SCID, which is severe combined immune deficiency, a form of dwarfism, most commonly known as cartilage hair hypoplasia, and Hirschsprung's disease, which is a bowel disease. And all three of these combined, Bella unfortunately had the rarest form of all three, so they were very difficult to diagnose. It took our genetics teams in two different provinces 2 years to understand the extent of each rare condition she was born with. I gave birth to her in Swift Current and we were air ambulanced to the closest hospital because of her bowel disease and the problems it was causing at that time. We never returned home for 2 years straight. We were in hospital the entire time. In her first year of life, she was in hospital entirely, had 6 surgeries and a bone marrow transplant when she was 15 months old. Moving on to the second year in hospital, we still had not gotten home. And because she had complications pre and post bone marrow transplant for having SCID. A bone marrow transplant is one of the only treatments for being born with SCID, which is basically no immune system. I'll explain that later as well. 2 years, Bella's 2 when for the first time we get to come home. To date, so she's almost 10 years old. She has battled and won septic shock 4 times. A lot of that had to do with being born with no immune system and we had no idea. She's had 30 surgeries, a bone marrow transplant, over 1,000 nights in hospital. She's been in hospital more nights than at home. And now, recently, and thankfully, this August 2023, Bella received her life-saving bowel transplant, her solid organ transplant. We are on the other side of that now and finally starting to see my little girl get her childhood back. Let's dive into Bella's genetic disorders, what they are and what they have meant for her, how they affect her. Let's start with the one we knew about first. Bella was born and at 3 days old, we were airlifted, she had surgery, and this was all for Hirschsprung's, the bowel disease. We later found out that it was actually long segment Hirschsprung's in a very, very rare form. So generally Hirschsprung's disease affects just the very bottom half of the colon and it acts as a blockage because it's dead cells. Hirschsprung's disease is dead cells. She had this blockage and it needed to be removed. So the surgeon went in, took out a section of her colon, sewed her back up. She still had problems. This is why for so many years, she just wasn't getting better and we couldn't bring her home because every time they went in and took a piece of what they thought was Hirschsprung's out, it was never enough. There was still more in there. It was skipping sections in her colon and then into her small bowel, which they had never seen before. So this rare disease was really turning heads in the medical field because a lot of her specialists did not understand how it was affecting her in this way and then had never seen it before. And it meant a lot of bowel surgeries for Bella, a lot of pain, distension, a lot of food restrictions. And ultimately Hirschsprung's disease led to bowel failure for Bella and put her on the list for transplant. Thankfully, she received her bowel transplant. She was listed in 2020 because not only did Hirschsprung's disease take away her entire colon, it affected her small bowel to the point where she was surviving on IV nutrition because her bowels couldn't take anything in properly. And there was a time limit there because of the deterioration of her vascular system as well from having so many central lines placed. It affected her on a daily basis in terms of pain, food restrictions, not always being able to eat or even eat what she would like. It caused her to have a lot of medications that needed to be either IV or injection, which meant needles, daily needles. This cruel bowel disease robbed her of her first 9 years of her childhood. Okay, backing up a little bit, in terms of genetic disorders, the reason why my husband and I never knew Bella was going to be affected with all three of these super, super rare conditions was we had no idea that we were both carriers of this gene that caused what our geneticists told us was a spontaneous gene mutation. And so my husband and I didn't know that we were carriers. When both husband and wife have this specific gene that my husband and I both had and then have a child, there's a 1 in 4 chance they'll be affected. And so Bella was that 1 in 4. And she was born with not only SCID, dwarfism, and this rare bowel disease, but the rarest form of each. And their only explanation is a genetic spontaneous gene mutation. And so we don't even really have statistics because in every form of each of her rare conditions, we have always been told that the specialists have never seen this before. Okay, let's move on to her SCID diagnosis. This was the most fatal, even more so than we realized before Hirschsprung's was threatening her life. SCID is severe combined immune deficiency, and that in layman's terms is being born with no immune system. When Bella was born, she could not fight the common cold, and we did not know. Now, thankfully, in our province in Saskatchewan, we do have newborn SCID screening, so they screen every newborn for this disease that Bella was born with. But at the time, they didn't have that when she was born, and so she went on 11 months undiagnosed, and a lot of children do not survive the first couple of months with this rare disease. And so her specialists have told me it's a miracle she's alive. We were in hospital because of her bowel disease and all the surgeries it caused, but the underlying condition as to why she was always sick was that she had no immune system. She'd survived septic shock. She survived 4 bowel surgeries with no immune system. That is what her doctors have deemed an absolute miracle. They don't know how, because kids like Bella don't survive the common cold at 1 month old. And she had had 2 surgeries by then on her bowel, which opens up your system to contamination. If SCID screening would have been in place, Bella would have had her bone marrow transplant right away. But because we didn't have SCID screening, it made her, it's the whole reason why she needed to be in hospital for so long after she was born, the full 2 years. The way we found out about how she had SCID was at 11 months old. I'd felt lymph nodes that were enlarged, and they ended up biopsying them and realizing she had 0 T cells, which are your viral fighters, and she had 0 B cells, which are your infection fighters. She had 0 of both. No immune system. And so they immediately put her on isolation, and we had to set her up for a bone marrow transplant. So that meant waiting for a donor to donate their stem cells, to donate their bone marrow, because my husband and I were not a match for her. So thankfully there's an international stem cell registration. Anybody can swab their cheek and save somebody anywhere in the world. Bella's donor was from Germany, and we later became in contact with her. She saved Bella's life. 2 people I have to thank for saving my daughter's life, her bone marrow donor and the family of her bowel donor. The way that SCID has affected Bella's everyday life is, so back to finding out she had SCID. She's 11 months old. They biopsied this lymph node, found out what was causing all these problems with her not being well, and set her up for the bone marrow transplant. She had that at 15 months old, and then did endure some complications. And so she still couldn't recover all of her B cells, her infection fighters. And so she needs monthly immune globulins, kind of like I call them immune boosters, once a month to help her survive and stay protected against germs and everything else that can affect your immune system. So she's still considered being immune compromised. And when around her bone marrow transplant, it was like her daily life was isolation in hospital while her immune system recovered and grew after the bone marrow transplant. Today, it affects her in a way that it's kind of like a hidden condition that we rely on complete strangers to help protect her. She is immune compromised, not only because she was born with SCID, but also because she's now on transplant medication, which also suppresses your immune system. She can't be in a compromising position where illness and viral infection could affect her and easier than it could your average person with a working immune system. In terms of SCID, I rely on a lot of other people and their awareness of hidden conditions, hidden disease, hidden rare disease that people don't see, because it can mean life or death for my child or anybody who is immune compromised. We rely on strangers, people in our everyday lives, to protect us by not going out in public sick and coughing and sneezing everywhere. That sort of thing is, wearing a mask when you're the one that's sick. Things like that matter to people with an immune disorder like Bella, my daughter. Hence why I advocate so much for her, because it's like a hidden condition that you just can't see and understand, the severity of it. Dwarfism. Bella has a form of dwarfism called cartilage hair hypoplasia. And her dwarfism was very hard to diagnose because she is so proportionate. She doesn't have a lot of typical features of common dwarfisms. And so her specialists in Calgary and Saskatchewan actually sent her full skeletal survey to a specialist in California, I believe. And he had said it was very difficult to diagnose her being so proportionate. So again, another super rare form of a rare disorder. And essentially he described it as her root bones are shortened. So from her shoulder to her elbow is shorter than average, and her hip bone to her knee is shorter than average. But pretty much everywhere else is pretty proportionate for her. So she's tiny, she's little. How dwarfism affects her on a daily basis is, some things like walking long distance can be really exhausting for her. I'm starting to realize that, there are some times when Bella needs a wheelchair to go a long distance. And I'm realizing that this world is still not very accommodating for people who need wheelchair access in buildings and stores. So I'm trying to advocate for that. A lot of things for her to help her with her independence is still not there that should be, like at school, for example. Doors are really heavy, the handles are too high. It can be unsafe, right? So she is 81 centimeters tall. So she is 9 years old, but the size of an average 1 to 2 year old. If you think about your typical 1-year-old, they can't go and open these large, massive doors, heavy doors that you see everywhere. Handles need to be lowered for her. Even some benches and some stairs are too tall for her. Toilets in public places that don't have stools, accessible stools by them. It really, on a daily basis, has affected her independence. And so I'm doing my best to help gain access to more resources for her dwarfism. So I want to end with just in general, who is Bella Brave? Who is my daughter? I'm an advocate for rare disease, but I don't believe that rare disease is her title. Her title is bravery. And she is showing me every day what bravery really means. From the moment she was born and made me a medical mama, she has shown me what it actually takes to be brave in situations that are out of your control, and how often they can happen, and how you gain your strength after each mountain that you've climbed or valley that you've rolled down. She's my spunky little 9-year-old right now that is into everything fashion and loving friends, being super social, high energy, that wears me out. An amazing girl that's looked death in the eye time and time again and said, not today, not today, sorry, nope. I am just so happy that we got the call for her bowel transplant, and that gave her her life back. We no longer had to worry about losing her. You know, the doctors sat us down and said, she might not have another 5 to 10 years if a donor doesn't become available. We no longer had to worry about her vascular system running out of options to keep her alive, to keep her alive until a donor became available for her. We are on the other side of that now. She's had her bowel transplant. It's successful, and I can see a future, my baby girl growing strong and supporting all other medical kiddos that need to be brave at times that are really, really difficult for them.